Do we need to ignore people's opinions in order to be successful? At least that's what the common advice is, right? That you should just learn not to care what other people think. Actually, disregarding all opinions that are uncomfortable leads to us missing valuable insight. And on our path to self-realization, we need to overcome our own insecurities, projections, and denial. For this, other people's opinions are actually our most valuable allies. So I'll tell you a story and let me know if you relate to this. Growing up, I was always told that I was opinionated. What exactly that meant was never made clear to me, and everyone around me had as much opinions as I did, but somehow I was the one who needed to be quieter. By the time I was a teenager, I had gained a pretty clear understanding of the social dynamics at play. Namely that people like me, women of my socioeconomic background, were supposed to be seen and not heard. And I was frustrated. I began to wonder why I should care about other people's opinions if they wouldn't do me the same favor. And my environment took notice. Now I wasn't only being opinionated, I was being hard-headed. And so my anger and my frustration grew into resentment. And the thing is, people were right. I was being hard-headed. Because of anger and frustration, I was refusing to listen to any type of advice. And what I didn't realize was that other people's opinions weren't the problem. The problem was my inability to filter the gold from the garbage. Most opinions we're exposed to on a daily basis are just noise. People talking about some washed-up celebrity dating someone you've never heard of, whether that person you met twice looks good with their new haircut or awful, invasive commentary on people's dietary choices, especially on social media, which seems to exist to remove any type of nuance from conversation. Opinions can feel particularly asinine. If opinions on strangers are simply annoying, people's opinions on us are downright hurtful. Other people's opinions can make it feel as if we have to shun parts of ourselves or dim them down in order to be accepted. And yet, somehow, whatever you do, there always seems to be someone voicing disapproval about it. This can look like bigoted commentary, thinly veiled insults, or just talking about you behind your back. But we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If we just disregard all opinions, then there are golden nuggets of insight that we miss. A lot of resistance to this idea comes from the misconception that all opinions are created equal. Courtesy of Oxford Languages, an opinion can be defined as a view or judgment formed about something, not necessarily based on fact or knowledge. An opinion just is. It's valid in the sense that it has the right to exist and you have the right to have it, but it doesn't mean that it has to have a factual basis. It can be based on bias, projections, our own unfulfilled desires or limiting beliefs, and those are the types of opinions that usually tell us more about the person expressing them than about ourselves. Let's call these uninformed opinions. When we mean we need to ignore people's opinions, we're actually talking about ignoring these uninformed opinions. An informed opinion is a view or judgment based on fact or knowledge. And this is what we're looking for, because informed opinions hold kernels of truth that help us on our journey of self-discovery. We have to be careful here not to be misled by our emotions. If you, like me, have learned to be quiet, it can feel very uncomfortable to consider to actually have to listen to other people. It can feel as if once again we have to drown out our own voice in order to give others room. Truly listening to someone else we disagree with can be hurtful to our ego. If we are particularly attached to a set of beliefs, then we attach part of our identity to them. So having someone else question that feels as if they are questioning us. Even with our friends and family, we don't want to listen to their opinions if they don't confirm ours. After all, even they have their own baggage. And to be honest, what they say might actually not be helpful if they are offloading their own limiting beliefs onto you. Based on their own fears, they might be trying to cut you down where they should actually be lifting you up. And even if they're trying to be supportive, good advice at the wrong time is actually bad advice. And yet, paradoxically, listening to someone else's opinion can be most hurtful when we actually agree with them. If a friend or partner points out a way in which we went wrong in a relationship, and they point out a behavior that we are not proud of, we'll often feel shame. And shame is the heaviest emotion I can think of. It can either make us retreat completely and never ever want to come out again, or it can put us in a reactive mode where we want to push away the person or the thing that caused us to feel it in the first place. Think about it. If someone expresses an opinion on you that you just 100% do not agree with, then you can simply disregard it and move on. But if they actually hit a vulnerable spot of yours, that is when we tend to blow up. Super not proud of this story, but I'm sharing it here in order to illustrate my point. When I was younger, I was known to lose my temper, to blow up at people. If I felt that someone had wronged me, I would either blow up on them, or I would do it later in private, essentially ranting to anyone who would hear me how terrible they were, what they did, what they didn't do, blah 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 blah. In university, I always did very well on my assignments. That was earned, I did my best, but that also made me cocky. So it was part of my identity that I was someone who did very well academically. And so on a very important assignment, life circumstances hadn't exactly allowed me to do my best. And I knew this. My assignment wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great either, and I wasn't very proud of it. So when I handed it in, I felt this regret because I knew that I would have liked to do better. And somehow, based on this identity of mine that I was someone who did very well academically, I still felt entitled to get some type of very good grade on it. So when my advisor gave me a rightfully critical review, I was furious. And to be honest, that anger was actually a cover mechanism, because the truth is that I was very insecure about my intelligence and about my academic skills. When they criticized my work, it actually felt as if they were criticizing me. And so when they said, hey, this part needed more and more of this, what I heard was, you're stupid and you do not actually have a place in academia. You messed this up because you do not belong here. And that obviously was very hurtful, even though it was not actually what they said, but what I projected onto their words based on my insecurities. And so within that conversation, they had actually made a comment that was inappropriate, not on the level that I projected onto it, but that was inappropriate, that was rude. And based on my own emotions about my projections, I actually completely disregarded their feedback and just focused on the rude comment they had made, and that is what I would retell and replay in my mind for months and months and months. Yes, while that comment was inappropriate, it shouldn't have made me disregard their feedback completely. I shouldn't have allowed myself to let my projections and emotions take over. And instead of just focusing on the one part I didn't agree with and therefore disregarding the entire thing, I would have benefited much more from accepting this uncomfortable truth about myself. It's much more comfortable to just live in a bubble of everyone else is just a hater than actually doing the hard work of examining yourselves and your motives. When we have a very strong emotional reaction to what someone else is saying, that is a sign that this is something within ourselves that needs to be healed. As you can see from my story, I very clearly projected my own insecurities onto my advisor's words, because what I failed to realize at that point was that what people say and what I interpret their words to mean are very different things. Especially when someone behaves inappropriately, we usually don't want to take responsibility for our own emotions, since we blame the other person. They are to blame, so they should be responsible, right? The thing is that acknowledging, recognizing, and taking responsibility for our own emotions doesn't actually excuse invasive or rude behavior, but instead it puts the power back into our own hands. If you still feel resistance to that idea, just ask yourself, what's the best revenge? Just sitting and moping about someone else's words? Or taking that energy and using it to actually better yourself and your life? Our insecurities can also come up, as they did in my example, in reaction to your own actions. Maybe you were the one who was being insensitive or rude, or you used terminology that you didn't realize was offensive and someone called you out on it. Either we can push that person away, or we can really internalize that and shame ourselves. We did something bad, so we must be bad. But again, we have to practice emotional intelligence and make sure not to project our own insecurities onto their words. Just because they called you out on your behavior doesn't mean they think you're a bad person. You have to make sure that you don't think you're a bad person. What we need to do in that moment is to be gentle and compassionate towards ourselves and acknowledge our own emotions, but also recognize that the other person did us a huge favor. The truth is that no well-adjusted person wants to intentionally hurt someone, especially with people we are close to. We hesitate to give them the hard truth they might need because we don't want to hurt them. Because we want people to feel good about themselves, we might even sugarcoat our own opinions. If someone around you overcame their own resistance and own fear about speaking the truth towards you, then that's actually very valuable and something we need to be grateful for. The reason this all is so valuable is because no matter how self-aware we become, there are always parts of ourselves we can't see. There will always be faults or mistakes we'll be blind to. It's like when we round a street corner, we make sure to watch out for an incoming car, but somehow we don't do the same thing in our self-development. Without other people giving us feedback or calling us out, we never have any chance of discovering these blind spots. Oftentimes, people can give us unbiased opinions on our own situations because they are not emotionally attached to them. I think anyone who's ever been in a romantic relationship or friendship that wasn't good for them and who had other people point this out to them know this, because they would tell us the exact words we needed to hear and somehow we would still manage to ignore them. So to put this all together, when we judge opinions on whether they are informed or uninformed, we can gauge how much value they should have for us. If we manage to overcome our initial shame and resistance, either way, we can learn about our own projections and insecurities by observing our emotional reactions to these opinions. And by doing so, we overcome our denial of the parts of ourselves that we can't see. Caring what other people think actually gives us the opportunity to step outside of our own limited viewpoint and learn to see ourselves from the outside. Now, at this point in the video, you might be wondering how to step out of the cycle of reactivity in other areas of your life. That's why your next step is to watch my video on how to do less, where I show you how to break out of compulsive productivity and actually enjoy your time spent here on Earth. But before you do that, let me know what you thought of this video in the comments down below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know. My name is Zhenya. Thank you so much for being with me, and I'll see you in the next one.